Signed for Liverpool, big money, big expectations, so it's nothing new for me. I'm ready, or more than ready for the challenge. I'm very excited about this new life and this new era I have in front of me, so ready to start.
Yeah, Cara, different to Stevie, obviously, but how did you feel when Fernando Torres went to Chelsea?
I couldn't believe it. And what I mean by that was I knew we'd kidded Chelsea. I'd played with Torres then for probably the last 12 months. He was a shadow of his former self. I think for 18 months at Liverpool, he was the best striker in the world. And I think he had such a good record against Chelsea, that obviously stuck in the owner's mind. Not so much a manager, because the manager changed so often at Chelsea, but I think at that stage, Chelsea was still a club where the owner was maybe buying players who he wanted. I think Shevchenko was a similar case as well. And what happened for us, and was very fortunate for Liverpool, was we played Chelsea that season. We weren't having a great season. Torres was having a really poor time, but he scored 2 against Chelsea. I think we won 2-0. I think that was under Roy Hodgson, 2 or 3-0 at Anfield. And I think the decision was probably made then for Roman Abramovich. As soon as January comes, we're going for Fernando Torres. Now, Fernando Torres at that, I mean, 50 million was like major money at that stage, and I think we were all in a state of shock. Listen, Gutter Torres was gone, but I think we all knew he was never going to be the same player, but we could not believe we'd got 50 million, and we ended up probably done something similar ourselves in some ways, in buying Andy Carroll for 35 million, really. But we did get Luis Suarez out of it, so the money where Torres went, we got 2 strikers out of it. But I was not surprised at all that it didn't go well. Fernando Torres.
It's interesting, Cara, isn't it? Because you touched on it then, that he wasn't in great form before that game, that he scored the 2 goals either, and then he goes and scores the 2 against us. But from a Chelsea point of view, obviously he was the one that I hated playing against him. He always seemed to score at Anfield or at the Bridge, and it was that kind of one player that Roman would kind of always ask about, and is he tough to play against? And Yossi was quite close to him. So Yossi was at Chelsea and was like, lads, Fernando's on his way. And we was like, no way. We're absolutely going to dominate the Premier League in Europe for the next 5-6 years. This is it. That was our fault from obviously playing against him and seeing it. So it's really interesting to hear that from your side.
I remember his first game was actually against Liverpool. And it was my first game back after I'd dislocated my shoulder. And I think Ancelotti put him straight in. And I always thought it was a massive mistake, really, putting him, because it was Liverpool. So the Liverpool fans giving him stick. The Chelsea fans still not, I wouldn't say not loving him, but obviously he's a new player. They don't know too much about him. And I just thought he should never have played in that game. I know he's the big money sign. Would that have been pressure from above Carlo Ancelotti to play him in that game? Because I always thought it was a massive mistake. We won the game. He got a lot of stick, and I'm sure it affected him, that.
I'm not sure it would have been pressure from above. Carlo definitely wasn't that type of manager to kind of listen to the board if they was kind of pushing. But we kind of changed our formation, really, because I think it was Didier and Fernando up front with Anelka just behind, wasn't it? So it was like we had 3 unbelievable strikers, and we was trying to kind of fit them in all together, kind of thing. But like you said, we had enough kind of firepower in Didier and Anelka, whether Anelka was wide or just behind, to kind of then bring Nando on later on the game, which would have been more of an impact for him, I think. But yeah, like it just seemed after that game, his confidence was shot to bits, to be honest.
Interesting stuff from Jamie Carragher and John Terry. Looking back at that Fernando Torres move from Liverpool to Chelsea, Carragher said, I couldn't believe it. And what I mean by that was I knew we kidded Chelsea. I played with Torres then for probably the last 12 months. He was a shadow of his former self. I think for 18 months at Liverpool, he was the best striker in the world. 50 million was like major money at that stage. And I think we were all in a state of shock. Of course, we were gutted Torres was going, but we could not believe we'd got 50 million pounds. I was not surprised at all that it didn't go well for Fernando Torres at Chelsea. Now, the flip side of that, John Terry said from a Chelsea point of view, he was the one I hated playing against. He always seemed to score at Anfield or the Bridge. Yossi Benayoun was quite close with him and told us Fernando is on his way. And we were like, well, no way. We're going to dominate the Premier League for the next 5 or 6 years. That was our thought from playing against him and seeing it. Well, Jules and Craig still with us. Jules, just going back to that time, what were the stories that were surrounding this move?
Well, it was more closer to what Carragher said more than Terry. I remember very vividly a Chelsea player I was really close to at the time saying that they could not believe it. The Chelsea players could not believe it when they learned about the deal with Torres. They were all away in a hotel because, if you remember, it was the last day of the transfer window in January. They were playing the next day away from home in the Premier League. And Carlo Ancelotti, who was the manager at the time, and all the players were together watching Sky Sports News, where you had the latest news about the final hours of the transfer window. And they were all gobsmacked to see coming up on the screen that Torres was coming to Chelsea. One, because Carlo Ancelotti knew nothing about it. There was not a moment where someone at the club, sporting director, Marina Granovskaya, Roman Abramovich, whoever, actually asked Ancelotti if he thought it was a good idea, even if he wanted Torres at the club. And then even the players were gobsmacked more because, like Carragher explained, they all knew that Torres was way at a level way below the one that he was at his peak at Liverpool.
Are you surprised by John Terry's comments, Craig?
I'm quite amazed by John Terry's comments. Look, a couple of things here. You know, Liverpool didn't kid Chelsea. People at Chelsea, whoever they were, made an absolutely atrocious decision. And secondly, John Terry, apart from playing against Fernando Torres, couldn't have watched Liverpool in the last 12 months because it was clear to see that Fernando Torres had a massive problem, whatever it was. Look, you know, I've been on record on our show, Dan, going along the lines of what Jamie Carragher was saying. John Champion and myself covered his first game for Liverpool away at Aston Villa. And it was a wow moment for me watching that man's performance. And as Jamie Carragher said, for 18 months after that, and I don't disagree, he was the best striker on the planet, the best natural striker on the planet. But something happened after that. Confidence, injuries, whatever it was, but he just wasn't the same player. Now, I was at Stamford Bridge many a time during Torres' time at Chelsea. Most of them he was coming off the bench. And I saw, because of the commentary position at Chelsea in the main stand, I saw the supporters around about us, the reaction when he came on, when he tried things, when the ball was bouncing off him, when he tried to take it on a dribble and he was almost falling over the ball. It just wasn't the same guy. And quite frankly, like Julian, when the announcement was made that they were signing Fernando Torres and the price tag was 50 million, everyone that was in the broadcast industry, or almost everybody, was absolutely flabbergasted.
Craig, have you ever been in a situation where a club has brought in a player and you knew instinctively, or you knew even before he arrived, that he was past his best, that this was a mistake?
Yeah, it was when Derby County brought me in, to be honest. But it's hard to, you know, players come in that are, you know, past their best, like Ruud Gullit. I mean, not name dropping here, but Ruud Gullit came into Chelsea and he was a former World Player of the Year. But he clearly, well, I think 34 or thereabouts, was past his peak, but he still had plenty to offer. And I think the big point here is, was how much did Fernando Torres have to offer Chelsea? Now, he did have some success, but I think, you know, less than a goal in 5 games is not 50 million worth of money. And so ultimately it was, particularly back then, you know, 50 million was a heck of a lot of money. It was money basically thrown down the drain in a very important position in the Chelsea team. And it also put Carlo Ancelotti, I think, in a very difficult position.
How did Chelsea get it so wrong, Jules, when it seemed to be apparent to everyone who was around Fernando Torres?
Well, there's a few things there. Like we mentioned with Carlo Ancelotti, I think it's an aberration in the modern era of football that you go and spend 50 million on a striker without even consulting your manager. And managers have to be a key part of your recruitment process, your recruitment system. Even if you just ask him what kind of position he's looking for, reinforcement or strengthening in squad, even better, what players he wants exactly, and then you go and get the players that he's asked you to get. or at least if you can't get the number 1 name, you get the number 2 name, which is a very similar profile than the number 1 name. That was not the case. That was not the case. And I'm not even sure how much Fernando Torres really wanted that move either, to be fair. So I think on every level, the lack of preparation, the lack of consultation inside the club, including with Carlo Ancelotti, and the lack of studying of the market, of the profile of the player, what really you needed at the time at Chelsea with the players that you already had in your squad, it was a complete disaster. And I don't really know if it was the mistake of the sporting director at the time, Mikel Menalo, or Marina Granovskaya, or if it was Roman Abramovich, a bit like with Shevchenko at the time, who really wanted Fernando Torres because of everything that he had done before in the past, especially against Chelsea. And maybe it was him saying like, no, I want him, and it would be only him and no one else, and I don't care what anybody else has said. But clearly it was a huge mistake from the beginning until the end.
Just to go back to that point, Jules, it's an interesting point because, you know, watching Fernando Torres at his time at Chelsea, he looked shell-shocked himself because all of a sudden he was propelled back in. He was a player at Liverpool and the media were talking about how he was struggling. All of a sudden, you know, Chelsea go out and spend a whopping 50 million on him. He's back in the limelight again. He's in London and it all rests on his shoulders. And he kind of watched his body language and you could see it in him. You could see it because a player knows. A player knows when he's not able to do what he did a couple of years before. A player's the first person that instinctively knows that. And Fernando Torres knew, whilst not admitting it publicly, he knew in his own head that he was not going to be able to deliver the performances that he once delivered for Atletico Madrid and Liverpool. And that was a huge weight on that player's shoulders. And we saw that in most of his performances in a blue shirt.